In a small Texas town, a poor mechanic works alone in his dusty garage, unaware that fate is about to knock on his door. One evening, a black luxury car stops by inside, a billionaire mother and her disabled daughter searching for hope. What begins as a simple repair soon becomes a miracle that will make the world stop and watch. Like, share, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. The sun sank low over the quiet Texas town, painting the horizon in gold and orange. Dust danced in the air as a small garage stood at the edge of the road, its open doors revealing the soft buzz of life inside. Ethan, a 25-year-old mechanic with oil-stained hands and determined eyes, wiped his brow as he worked on an old pickup truck. His world was small, just engines, metal, and dreams, too humble to be spoken aloud. Yet beneath the grime and sweat his heart was vast, filled with a rare kind of compassion. Life had not been easy for Ethan. His father had once owned this garage before illness took him away, leaving Ethan with debts and an unfinished promise to help others, no matter their worth. Every day he repaired broken things for people who couldn't afford much, charging less than he should, earning just enough to survive. He never complained. Somewhere deep inside, he believed that helping others was worth more than any amount of money. One early morning, as he tightened the last bolt on a motorcycle, he heard the low purr of an engine unlike any he'd heard before. A black luxury car rolled to a stop outside his garage, its polished surface gleaming against the dusty ground. Ethan straightened his back, unsure what kind of person would come to a place like his. From the car stepped Victoria, a graceful woman in her 40s, wearing a soft beige coat and dark sunglasses that couldn't hide the sorrow etched on her face. The passenger door opened slowly, and a young girl was wheeled out. Emma, 19, pale and quiet, her legs motionless under a blanket. Her eyes, however, were full of life, curious and fragile at once. Victoria pushed her daughter's wheelchair forward, her expression torn between pride and pain. She stopped in front of Ethan, her voice low but clear. "Are you the one who fixes things people give up on?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, glancing at the car, then back at her. "I try my best, ma'am," he said humbly. Victoria studied him for a moment, as though unsure whether this young man covered in grease could possibly help her. "My daughter hasn't walked in years," she said finally. "Doctor said there's no hope, but she still dreams. She wants to move freely, even just a little. Can you make something, anything that might help?" Ethan looked at Emma, who was staring at the scattered tools and shining parts around him like they were pieces of magic. His heart tightened. "I can try," he said simply. "That's all I can promise." Inside the garage, Victoria wheeled Emma closer to a small workbench. Ethan began to show them sketches of projects he had built. Small adjustments for wheelchairs, supportive frames, tiny inventions created from leftover scrap. None were perfect, but each carried a trace of hope. Emma's eyes lit up as she examined them. She asked questions, softly, shyly, about how they worked. For the first time in a long while, her voice sounded alive. Victoria noticed it, her chest tightening with emotion she had buried for years. The afternoon passed slowly, filled with the rhythm of tools and the hum of machinery. Ethan worked as Victoria and Emma watched quietly. The billionaire woman, who had spent her life surrounded by technology and wealth, found herself mesmerized by the sight of this poor mechanic's hands moving with such purpose. There was something sacred about the way he treated his craft, like every bolt and screw was a prayer. She hadn't seen that kind of sincerity in years. Her world was full of contracts and expectations, but here, in this dusty little shop, she saw truth. As the hours slipped away, the air grew cooler. Emma laughed softly when Ethan accidentally smudged grease across his cheek, and for a moment the sound filled the whole garage with warmth. Victoria turned her face away, tears threatening to fall. It had been so long since she'd heard her daughter laugh like that. "You really think you can build something that could help her stand?" Victoria asked hesitantly. Ethan paused, looking up from his work. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but if I can give her even one moment of hope, then it's worth everything I have." That night, long after they had left, Ethan remained in the garage. The moonlight spilled through the windows as he drew designs on an old notebook, sketching gears, levers, and braces that might lift Emma from her chair. His mind buzzed with possibilities. He didn't have expensive equipment, but he had patience, skill, and heart. The idea of that young girl's eyes lighting up gave him strength. Outside, the Texas wind whispered through the fields, carrying the faint sound of crickets, and somewhere inside Ethan, a spark of determination ignited. Meanwhile, in her large mansion across town, Victoria sat by her daughter's bedside. Emma was already asleep, her hands resting peacefully on her lap. Victoria watched her for a long time, remembering the laughter from the garage. She realized how strange it was, how this poor mechanic with nothing but tools and hope had done what no doctor could. He had made her daughter believe again. For the first time in years, Victoria felt something stir in her heart, a quiet belief that maybe miracles were still possible. Morning came, and Ethan was already at work before sunrise. He gathered spare motors from discarded wheelchairs, recycled steel from old car frames, and tiny electrical parts salvaged from broken radios. His workshop filled with the smell of oil and the sound of faith taking shape. He didn't know if the device would work, but he knew he had to try, for Emma, for her mother, and for the promise he had made to himself long ago, to never stop fixing what was broken, even when it seemed impossible. By the time Victoria and Emma returned later that week, the garage looked different. Drawings were pinned to the walls, metal frames rested on tables, and the air vibrated with quiet hope. Ethan looked tired, his shirt soaked with sweat, but his eyes were bright. "It's not ready yet," he said, "but I'm getting closer." Victoria smiled faintly, and Emma's face glowed with anticipation. In that humble little workshop, surrounded by the scent of metal and the warmth of effort, three very different souls began to build something far greater than a machine. They began to build faith. Days passed slowly, filled with the hum of tools and the crackle of metal. Ethan worked until his hands blistered, designing and testing every small part of the wheelchair. Each night, he fell asleep on the workshop floor, surrounded by sketches and wires, dreaming of Emma standing tall under the Texas sun. The little garage had become a world of its own, where hope replaced luxury and determination replaced science. Victoria visited every other day, sometimes bringing coffee or food, watching silently as the poor mechanic poured his soul into something that even doctors had called impossible. Victoria had spent her life around people who spoke in numbers and profit. Yet when she watched Ethan work, she saw something money couldn't measure: pure kindness. He never asked for payment. When she tried to offer, he refused gently, saying, "If this works, that'll be more than enough." Emma watched him too, fascinated by his patience. She started to spend more time at the garage, sketching beside him, her laughter becoming a melody that filled the dusty air. Slowly, life began to return to her cheeks, and Victoria noticed. One afternoon, as the sun blazed through the open door, Ethan adjusted the mechanical arms of the wheelchair. Emma sat quietly beside him, handing him small tools when he asked. "You really think this can work?" she asked softly. Ethan looked up with a smile. "I think miracles take time, but sometimes they just need the right hands to build them." Emma blushed at his words, her heart fluttering in a way she hadn't felt in years. Victoria, standing a few feet away, saw it too, the way her daughter's face glowed again with light. Ethan's invention was unlike anything she had seen. It wasn't polished or modern, but it was real, crafted from courage and sleepless nights. The design included adjustable braces that could gently lift Emma's legs while supporting her balance. He even added a small motorized system powered by a hand controller, making it easy to move. But he wasn't satisfied yet. "It's not perfect," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. "Perfection isn't real," Victoria replied softly. "What you're building is hope, and that's far more powerful. For a moment their eyes met, a quiet understanding passing between two worlds. That evening Victoria invited Ethan for dinner at her mansion. He hesitated at first, uncomfortable stepping into a place so grand. But Emma insisted, smiling with excitement. When he arrived, the house was glowing with soft lights. The dinner was simple, yet the gesture meant more than words. Ethan sat across from them, his rough hands folded politely. For the first time, Victoria saw him not as a mechanic, but as a man of depth, humility, and quiet strength. He spoke little, but when he did, every word carried honesty, a language Victoria had almost forgotten. Later that night, as Ethan prepared to leave, Victoria stopped him at the door. "You've done more for my daughter in weeks than doctors did in years," she said, her voice trembling. "Why?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because she believed in me when no one else did." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "You remind me of my husband," she whispered. "He used to fix broken things too, just not machines, but hearts." Ethan looked down, humbled. "Maybe we're all just trying to fix what we can," he said before stepping out into the cool Texas night. The next morning, Ethan returned to the garage before dawn. He wanted the final design ready for Emma's test day. He soldered wires, polished steel, and tightened bolts with renewed energy. The thought of Emma's smile pushed him forward. Meanwhile, in her mansion, Victoria watched her daughter try on new shoes, something she hadn't done in years. "Why the shoes?" Victoria asked gently. Emma smiled shyly. "Because if I stand, I want to feel like I'm standing for real." Victoria turned away, tears brimming in her eyes, her heart swelling with both fear and hope. By the end of that week, the prototype stood complete, a sleek motorized wheelchair with a hidden support lift. It was built from recycled parts, yet it looked like a masterpiece. Ethan stood back, admiring it with quiet pride. Victoria arrived just as he tested the controls, the chair gently rising and lowering. "It works," he said softly, his voice trembling with relief. Emma's eyes widened with wonder. Victoria covered her mouth, unable to speak. "Tomorrow," Ethan said, smiling, "we'll let her try. But tonight she needs rest. Big miracles take brave hearts." That night none of them slept well. Victoria stared at the ceiling, whispering prayers into the darkness. She had built empires, managed millions, yet nothing mattered now except her daughter's chance to stand. Emma lay awake too, her mind racing with emotions she couldn't name. She imagined standing, taking one step, just one, and hugging her mother from a height she hadn't known since childhood. In the garage, Ethan sat beside the completed chair, exhaustion in his bones, but hope burning in his chest. He whispered softly to himself, "Tomorrow will be the day." As the morning sun rose over the fields, the world seemed to hold its breath. Victoria's car pulled up once again outside the garage, the same way it had on that first day, but this time everything felt different. Inside, the air was thick with emotion. Emma's hands trembled as Ethan adjusted the straps on the chair. "Whatever happens today," he said gently, "you're already a miracle." Victoria nodded, tears already forming. She held her daughter's hand tightly, whispering, "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." The moment of truth was only a heartbeat away. The morning light poured into the garage like a golden blessing, illuminating every tool, wire, and memory within. Ethan stood beside the new chair, his palms trembling slightly as he prepared for the most important test of his life. Emma sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor, breathing slowly. Victoria stood close, her hands clasped tightly together, her heart racing faster than she could control. The air felt heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. "Are you ready?" Ethan asked softly. Emma nodded, her lips forming a small, brave smile that made Victoria's eyes glisten. Ethan gently positioned Emma's feet on the floor plates and adjusted the braces around her legs. He explained every movement calmly, reassuring her that he was right there, no matter what happened. The machine hummed to life, a soft electric sound filling the silence. "It'll start slow," he said. "Just breathe." Emma's fingers tightened around the armrests. Victoria took a step closer, her tears already threatening to fall. The motor began to rise, lifting Emma's fragile body inch by inch. Her heart pounded as her legs straightened, shaking under the unfamiliar weight of her own body. For the first time in almost a decade, Emma stood upright. Her eyes widened in disbelief, her lips trembling as she looked down at her legs. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. Victoria gasped, covering her mouth with both hands, her whole body trembling. "Oh, my baby," she cried, her voice cracking with emotion. Ethan steadied Emma carefully, one hand hovering near her shoulder in case she lost balance. But she didn't. She stood there wobbly, trembling yet standing, like a miracle carved out of courage, love, and the hands of a humble mechanic. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I can feel it, Mom," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "I can feel the ground." Victoria couldn't hold back anymore. She ran forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter's waist, crying against her shoulder. Ethan looked away, swallowing hard, trying to blink back his own tears. He'd seen broken engines come to life, shattered parts repaired, but nothing compared to this. It wasn't metal he'd fixed. It was faith, it was love. It was the connection between a mother and her child, reignited after years of quiet pain. The sound of Victoria's sobs filled the garage, echoing against the metal walls. She kept whispering "thank you" over and over, as if the words could never be enough. Emma laughed through her tears, shaking with both exhaustion and joy. "You did it, Ethan," she said. Ethan shook his head, smiling through blurred vision. "No," he replied quietly. "We did it. You believed." The sunbeam caught Emma's face as she stood taller, her body trembling but alive. Her eyes, glowing with a new kind of strength that came from years of hope, finally answered. After several minutes, Ethan helped her sit back down gently. The moment was almost sacred. Victoria knelt beside her daughter, brushing away tears from her cheeks. "You're my miracle," she whispered. Emma took her mother's hands, squeezing them gently. "He made it happen," she said, glancing at Ethan. Victoria looked up at him, her heart breaking with gratitude. "You've given me back my world," she said softly. "I can never repay you." Ethan smiled faintly, shaking his head. "You don't have to, Mom." Seeing her stand, "That's more than I ever dreamed." Victoria stood slowly, wiping her tears. She looked around the small garage, the peeling paint, the rusty tools, the scent of grease, and realized this humble place had witnessed something money couldn't buy. "You could work for anyone," she said. "Why stay here?" Ethan shrugged, his gaze distant. "Because this place reminds me what really matters," he said. "It's not the things we fix, it's the people we help." Victoria smiled, understanding the depth of those words. She had built empires, yet in this small shop, she had rediscovered humanity, the kind her wealth had quietly stolen away over the years. As the afternoon sun began to fade, Emma asked if she could try standing again. Ethan agreed, helping her adjust the settings. This time, she stood more steadily, even managing to shift her weight slightly, her fingers still gripping the armrest for balance. "You're doing it," Victoria whispered in awe. "You're really doing it," Emma laughed, her cheeks glowing. "I told you I would, Mom." They all laughed softly then, three hearts bound together by something far stronger than circumstance. The sound was pure, light, and free, the sound of faith being rewarded. Outside, the wind rustled through the fields, carrying the echoes of their laughter into the distance. Victoria turned to Ethan one last time before leaving. "You've changed our lives," she said. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you come to me." Ethan nodded respectfully, his heart full, but his words simple. "Just promise you'll never stop believing in her," he said. Victoria placed a hand over her heart. "I never will." As their car drove away, Ethan stood by the garage door, watching the sunset, feeling something warm settle deep inside him, a peace he hadn't known before. That night, Emma stood once more in her room, practicing with gentle support, smiling each time she managed a moment longer. Victoria sat nearby, her tears returning, but this time from pure joy. In her heart, she thanked God for the mechanic who had nothing, but gave them everything. Across town, Ethan sat outside his garage looking at the stars. The same hands that once struggled to survive had created a miracle. In that moment, the line between rich and poor disappeared, replaced by one simple truth: kindness, when pure, makes even the impossible come alive.